Hi, this is Reverend Bill Banuchi from the New York State Faith and Freedom Coalition. And as we prepare to celebrate our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I want to share some thoughts with you, and I believe the word of the Lord for this particular time in the history of the church and of this nation. I watched this past week on TV the televised events with concern over the nation's growing obsessions with sports, from the FIFA World Cup, the NBA Finals, UFC at the White House, Stanley Cup, US Open golf, the start of the Major League Baseball season, and countless other events going on at the same time. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for sports. But when people say that only sports can bring people from different groups together, I become concerned. I see a kind of a religious zeal that assuages the heart's longing for purpose and cause. And understand that whatever occupies our minds the most does, in effect, become our religion. And when fathers invest more effort in raising loyal fans than they do in raising responsible citizens and faithful Christians, I worry about the future of our nation. And there's nothing wrong with sports serving as a healthy outlet for a stressed populace. The danger comes when sports becomes a diversion from responsible citizenship and strong parenting. I fear our young people are more likely to know their favorite athletes' statistics than they are to understand the basic principles of our government and our political system, and even who represents them in the halls of government. Now, this does not bode well for the future of our nation and for future generations. I mean, how many examples do we really need in world history to teach us of all the reasons why a nation fails? Take a look at the Roman Empire, for example. Roman satirist Juvenal told us about what he called panem and circenses, or bread and circuses, referring to the Roman populace that has become more concerned with free grain distributions and public entertainment than they are with civic virtue and responsible participation in public life. According to Juvenal, citizens had surrendered their political responsibilities in exchange for comfort and amusement. Sounds much like today, I'm afraid. Now, can there really be valid similarities between contemporary America and historic Rome? Entertainment then was a distraction. Romans flocked to gladiatorial contests. This past Sunday, we had the UFC event at the White House, Ultimate Fight Championships. Now, is that nothing less than our modern day gladiatorial contests? Chariot races? How about the Indianapolis 500? Times have changed, but human nature has not. Today, people devote enormous amounts of time, money, emotional energy to professional sports, streaming entertainment, and social media. I just heard a report that 2 million people lined the streets of New York City for the ticker tape parade for the NBA champions, the New York Knicks. So I have to question, are we now becoming one nation under the Knicks? God help us. Closely associated with the issue of sports is the issue of gambling. Today, the prevalence of gambling has become ubiquitous, available everywhere. There are more ways to gamble than ever before. We have online sports betting, micro betting, online casinos, daily fantasy sports prediction markets, social casino games, mobile apps, and more. Not long ago, if you wanted to gamble, you would have to travel to a casino or a betting parlor. Today, just pick up your phone wherever you are, at home, at work, wherever, and soothe your impulse to spend money. Sports betting was primarily limited to Nevada, and you had to bet before a game. Today, you can bet anywhere and keep on betting throughout the game on all kinds of different things throughout the entire event. Gambling was considered, believe it or not, as a vice that is destructive to society. Today, we're advertising this same vice and actually sanctioning it. It's actually administered now by state governments. Gambling is not a virtue, and only a virtuous society is capable of preserving freedom. So I am very much concerned. Speaking of virtue, just take a look at the latest TV trends. Shows glamoring all kinds of dysfunction, like the new reality show. Have you heard of this one yet? Quote, This is Poly. It's about five different polycules. That's groups of people involved in polyamorous relationships. It's all about how they navigate love, how they deal with jealousy, communication, trust, family life, and public reactions to their relationships. Is this not a circus? I've often said the end game of the left of this world is to recreate another Sodom and Gomorrah. This is Polly is just one more step in that direction. Look at the commercialization of it all. Roman games were often sponsored by political leaders seeking popularity. Today, modern sports involve vast corporate interests, advertising, and political influence driven by greed and self interest. Now, understand, I'm all for capitalism, but capitalism without a Christian ethic will be as bad as any other system, perhaps even worse. As far as government goes, just because it can bring in more tax revenue, that doesn't make it a legitimate source of income. Now, the Roman Empire lasted about 500 years. We're only halfway down that path at 250, and already we see telltale signs that precede the destruction of a nation: bread and circuses. How will our nation be conquered? Let's hear from the prophetic words of Abraham Lincoln, who told us when he was just 28 years old, speaking at the Young Men's Lyceum on January 27, 1837. Listen to this and see how prophetic it was. The title of his talk was, quote, The Perpetuation of Our Political Institutions. And he said this: In the great journal of things happening under the sun, we, the American people, find our account running under date of the 19th century of the, quote, Christian era. Today, we are still in the Christian era, the 21st century of the Christian era, not common era, the Christian era. Go on. Let me go on with what he said. He said, We find ourselves in the peaceful possession of the fairest portion of the earth as regards extent of territory, fertility of soil, and salubrity of climate. That's just a fancy word for healthy and invigorating. In those days, they had a lot more vocabulary than we do today. He said, We find ourselves under the government of a system of political institutions conducing more essentially to the ends of civil and religious liberty than any of which the history of former times tells us. We, then mounting the stage of existence, found ourselves the legal inheritors of these fundamental blessings. We toiled not in the acquirement or establishment of them. They are a legacy bequeathed us by a once hardy and brave and patriotic, but now lamented and departed race of ancestors. Theirs was the task, and nobly they performed it, to possess themselves, and through themselves us, of this goodly land, and to uprear upon its hills and its valleys a political edifice of liberty and equal rights. 'Tis ours only to transmit these to the latest generation, that fate shall permit the world to know. The task: gratitude to our fathers, justice to ourselves, duty to our posterity, and love for our species in general, all imperatively require us faithfully to perform it. How then shall we perform it? At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the enemies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth, our own excepted, in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up from among us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, quote, and women, we must live through all time or die by suicide. Will we ever learn? We have the record of fallen nations, like Rome, like Israel before the Assyrian and Babylonian conquest. How foolish would it be for us, knowing the reasons nations fail and repeating the same tragic history? We have no excuse. 1 Corinthians 10:11 tells us that these things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages have come. Now, if we will please God, if we're longing for that good and faithful servant commendation from our Father in heaven, we must do our part. We must do all we can to see the freedom that our forebears passed on to us to be passed down to the next generation. We are responsible for this generation and for the generations to follow. Our distractions from the things that really matter have made us vulnerable to the evil axis, that evil triad of the American left, the democratic socialists slash communists, and the Islamic political movement, all joined together to bring down American Western civilization and the Judeo Christian values upon which we have thrived. This is nothing less than the age old conflict between God and Satan. That's why, beginning in September, I will begin teaching and preaching what God says concerning revival and reformation for our land for such a time as this. We've studied the Declaration of Independence, we've studied the Constitution. More recently, we studied the New York State Constitution. In September, we will go back to God's Constitution, the Word of God, the Bible, to be as of the sons of Issachar who understood the times and knew what Israel was to do so that we would know what America, what we as Americans are to do. Then working with civic groups like Orange Strong and your local political party will put feet to our faith to see this nation redeemed and transformed for the benefit of coming generations and to the glory of God. Remembering the words of President Reagan, who told us that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for and protected and handed on to them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like in the United States when men were free. God forbid that they would ever come. So, as part of our rededication to God on this 250th anniversary of the birth of our independence, let us also rededicate ourselves to learning from our history to prevent the follies of fallen nations, to preserve this land of the free and the home of the brave for our children and our grandchildren and the children yet to come. So plan on joining us in September on the second and fourth Saturday of each month as we come together to be equipped for our WISP meetings. We call them WISP meetings. That stands for Worship, Information, Strategy, and Prayer. And to come so that you can too join us to become faithful stewards, equipped for the to preserve the gift of liberty. Join the New York Faith and Freedom Coalition right now. Make the commitment As our founders pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, we must do no less for the benefit of our children, our grandchildren, and ultimately for the glory of God. We take our instructions for the words of Nehemiah, who said in Nehemiah 4:14, he said, "Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your home." But we know that God is able to do immeasurably above all that we can ask or imagine, according to his power at work in us. So I decree that America will turn back to God. America will bless God. Thank you for listening. Look forward to seeing you in September. Have a blessed summer. Have a blessed celebration, 250th celebration, and we'll see you in September. Take care and God bless. Don't forget to join the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Click the link on the bottom of the page. Take care and God bless.